Hi, it's Carolyn. I'm here to help you learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes. And in this video, I want to show you guys some of my older cakes because I get people saying to me all the time, I wish that I was as good as you are. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I've been doing this for over 20 years and I was not always this good. So it's nice to take a look back and see how far you've come. That's why I always say to take pictures of all the cakes that you make, even the ones that you hate, because it's nice to look back a year or two or over 20 years later and see how far you've come. So I'm going to show you a picture of an old cake versus a newer cake with the same theme and let you know what I've done different and what I've learned along the way. So we will start with number one. And that is this golf theme sheet cake. And when I first started out, I had a sheet cake phase. I only made sheet cakes because I did not know how to ice really smooth buttercream cakes and stack them and support them and make them level and not fall apart. So I just stuck with sheet cakes. Now this cake, it's okay. There's nothing exciting about it. It's just very trite, meaning lacking originality, just kind of boring. But I did the half golf balls around the side, and then I have the plastic figure with the plastic flag and the sand pits, and it's okay. There's nothing really exciting about it. But a couple years ago, I made this golf themed cake and it just looks so much more professional. I have that argyle pattern on the bottom and I have a video showing you how I make that and I will link that below, along with those 3D golf balls rather than the half golf ball. And I added some texture with some impression mats on the top tier. And the way I do the two-dimensional fondant names and figures, it just looks so much cleaner and more professional. Now I have videos showing you how I use my trace cut and smooth method to make my two-dimensional figures and decorations and names and numbers, and all of that will be linked below. On to theme number two. And that is this Noah's Ark cake. Now, I made this for my friend's son, and this was still in my sheet cake phase. And I used to make those pictures by doing a pattern transfer. And I have a video showing you how I do that for lettering on your cakes, and I will link that below. But I used to take a star tip and fill in the black outline of a picture, and it's okay for a beginner. You know, I think we all start somewhere, and this is where I started. Versus a couple years ago, I made this Noah's Ark cake, and it looks so much better. However, I have to say, I don't love making three-dimensional animals like this. And yes, I know they look so cute. However, I don't think you could pay me enough to make this cake again because it was very stressful. But from the time I made the sheet cake to the time I made this cake, I learned how to do three-dimensional figures. I learned how to work with fondant, and there's a lot more creativity and thought put into a design like this. So there's a big improvement in the course of probably about 8 or 9 years. On to number three, and that is this Phillies cake. And yes, I'm wearing my Phillies shirt today. That was a happy accident. But this is an all buttercream cake, and I probably made this about 15 years ago or so. And it looks a little, it's nice, right? Like the cake is nice. There's no wow factor about it. I remember piping those red stripes down the side, and my hand was shaking. And it just doesn't look nice and neat. And again, with the Phillies logo, I did the little star tip to fill it in. And the number topper, it looks okay. It's just not very creative. It still looks a little sloppy and amateur. Versus this Phillies cake that I made last year. And look how much better this looks. This looks a lot more modern because I made it more narrow and 3 layers tall rather than shorter and wider like the original cake. And I used fondant stripes around the side so everything is even. So I did a thicker white stripe and a thinner red stripe the whole way around the cake, which looks a lot more polished. Now the logo on here is an edible image. I have the edible image banner on the bottom. I learned how to make a 3D baseball, and I have a video showing you how I do that, and that will be linked below. And that number topper just looks so much better than the first one. And I also have my curlies on here, and if you watch my videos, you know I have a curly addiction, and I just think it makes the cake look a little bit more festive. So this design just looks a lot more modern and professional than the original. The fourth theme is this christening cake. Now, it was still back in my sheet cake phase. And if you zoom in there, you can see that the icing is not perfect. There's a lot of like indents and pock marks in there. And I put that top border around the edge to kind of hide the fact that the cake wasn't perfect. My baby blocks are rounded, and I wrote on the blocks with buttercream. That was my jam back in the day. I used to just write on fondant with buttercream, which is the same thing that I did on that bottom banner. It's fondant, and I wrote on it with buttercream, and it's a little sloppy. The design is okay. There's nothing exciting about it. Fast forward to 2021, and I made this cake, and it's very similar color scheme. It doesn't have a teddy bear on it, but you could see the cross just looks so much more professional. And I did just release a video showing you how I make that fondant cross, and I will link that below. But instead of writing the letters with buttercream, I used tap-it letter cutters, and those can be a pain in the butt. I do have a video showing you how I use them. That will be linked in the description. They are a little time-consuming, but they look so much cleaner. And also my baby blocks are a lot sharper. Now, I don't think I have a video showing you how I make the baby blocks. I don't think I've ever filmed it before. I do it weird. I feel like if I film it and I show you guys, you're gonna be like, why did you do it that way? You can probably just buy a mold and stuff some fondant in there and get a really sharp block, but it's just the way that I do it. So next time I make the baby blocks, I will film it and post it. But you see how the blocks just look, and I keep saying look so much better. I wish I could think of another way to say it, but there's a big improvement. That's what I'll say. A big improvement in the baby blocks and just the overall look and design of the cake. On to number 5, and that is this Hollywood theme cake. Now, we've seen this all the time, right? This is a very predictable design. But again, I wrote with buttercream on that black star, a number 10, and I wrote her name. I just freehanded it. And the stars on wires, like that's predictable. That was a big thing back in the day. I still do that sometimes. I do have a video showing you how I put fondant decorations on wires, and I will link that below. But the design is just lacking a little bit of originality. Fast forward to this cake, and it is very similar to the first one. I know it does have another tier, and this is why I say building your cakes narrow and taller just looks so much better. And there I go again, so much better. But there's an improvement in the aesthetics, if you will, rather than having the cake shorter and wider. And I think both of these cakes probably feed about the same amount of people. Now look at the name. Again, I use those tap-it letters to make the name. The number topper looks way better, and I have a video showing you how I make Sweet 16 number toppers, and that will be linked below. On to theme number 6. And that is this pizza cake. And if you know me, you know I love making food cakes. I think all cake decorators love to make cakes that look like food. But this cake, like the pizza cake, it's nice. You could tell it's a cake trying to look like pizza, right? Because the cheese just looks like pieces of fondant, which it actually is. And the pepperoni, there's no real detail in this cake. Yeah, I put it in a pizza box, but that, you know, that doesn't save the design. And then I did make another one where it turned out like this, and look at the improvement. I learned how to use a cake airbrush gun to add a little bit of dimension and detail to the crust. And for the pepperoni, I thinned out the edges, and I think I took a sponge and dipped it in some kind of coloring and dabbed it on there to add some texture and dimension to the pepperoni. Because if you just have a circle of dark red fondant versus some fondant that was decorated to look like pepperoni and detail was added, you can see a big improvement in that design. And for the cheese, I think with the cheese on this new one, I did like a shaved chocolate rather than pieces of fondant. It just looks more realistic. On to theme number 7. And that is this smile emoji theme cake. And while this is nice, again, I feel like this is a predictable design. I have the number on top, the name in the front, a few plain smiley faces. I guess those little loop flower things are a little creative, if you will, but the bottom border is that ball border, but it's just like an old school way of doing cakes. And I don't really love the colors of this cake and the color distribution versus this emoji cake. And look, the black background really makes the decorations pop. And with the emojis, I made them look more realistic, by, again, using the petal dust and shading them in. And I used a bunch of different emojis rather than the same smiley face one. I also tried to get a little creative with the number topper, and her name is Tara's, but it's only with one Z, but they used to have a ZZZ sleeping emoji, so I decided to incorporate that. So I was trying to have like a creative distribution of the decorations on the cake, if that makes any sense, rather than just having the plain yellow smile with the black eyes in the mouth, which looks nice, but there's no wow factor. On to the 8th design, and that is this Circus tent themed cake, and I still have nightmares about it. Oh my gosh, I hated making these cakes. Now this design is pretty plain and boring. It's the tent on top with a few clowns around the edge, and there's no real creativity in this design. However, I remember I made the top, what is it, the apex, the point, whatever it is, of the tent. That top piece is made out of Rice Krispies, and to try to get it to come to a point and then have the bottom of it match the diameter of the cake that it's sitting on, super annoying. I will never make that again. I don't like it. So if somebody ever wants to order a cake, like a tent themed cake, I will do something like this. Now I know this is not the same exact design, but I just wanted to show you that this is how I will make a tent. This is 2-dimensional fondant, and that's a big part of cake decorating. So you are going to try something. Some things you're going to love, and some things are going to drive you a little crazy. So I don't want to make another 3-dimensional circus tent. So if somebody asks me to make a cake like that, I will show them something like this and say, I can do this, and give them a bunch of different options. I think people have in their head that 3-dimensional decorations are automatically better, but in my case, since I've honed in on my skill and I've gotten so good at making 2-dimensional decorations, that's what I try to steer people towards. The 9th theme is this owl cake. Now, I used to make my 2-dimensional figures differently. I would do like a royal icing flow, kind of like how you make cookies, and I would do that on pieces of fondant. And it looked okay for the time that I was doing it, but I learned how to do 2-dimensional figures so much better. And there I go, so much better. But this design, it's very boring and predictable. I have the owl on top, and the top tier is covered in different color leaves, and then I put leaves in circles around the bottom tier, and that's something that I think is a little amateur when you just repeat a decoration the whole way around the cake, which is something I'm guilty of. It's something that we all do, especially when we're first starting out, but there's not a lot of creativity put into the design. So this cake is nice, however, it could look so much better. So this owl cake is still, to this day, one of my favorite designs that I've ever done. And do you see how that fondant owl looks more professional than that royal icing owl that I made? The number 1 really pops. It's a statement number on there. I have that big bow on there, and I do have a video showing you how I make a big statement bow. That will be linked below. And I have the baby blocks on there for the name, so I didn't just write the name on there. I tried to think of a different way to incorporate the name. Sometimes just writing the name on the cake, it's nice. But other times you want to add the name in a creative way, like the baby block. It just adds a little more visual interest to your cakes. And then instead of having leaves on there in the background, which is very predictable, I did a little bit of stenciling on the top tier and some polka dots on the bottom tier. So I think this design is just a little more interesting than the first one. And the last theme before my little extra at the end is this baby boy baby shower cake with the feet on it. And like I said before, the pattern repetition going around the cake is just something that we all do when we're first starting out and we don't know how to come up with a design. Is it bad? No. Is it great? No. But the bow looks a little weird. That's before I knew how to make fondant bows. And I have a video showing you how I make a cascading bow go down the cake. I think that would have looked way better than doing it like this. But the design is just kind of boring and plain. And I can't believe I'm going to show this cake as a positive. But I made this baby bum cake not too long ago. And if you watch my videos, you know I hate baby bum cakes. I hate pregnant belly cakes. Having feet and body parts on a cake, for some reason, it bothers me. But this design, is a vast improvement in the first one. It's more interesting. You see how rather than repeating the pattern around the cake, I incorporated the feet as the baby bum. The fondant lettering is a nice addition to the cake, along with the little teddy bear and the sneaker booties. Now, I know the first cake was a simpler design and this is a more detailed design, but just goes to show you how you can add more decorations to a cake without having it be the same exact thing. Meaning, I added more detail to this first cake by adding more footprint fondant pieces, rather than maybe doing a pair of baby booties or a teddy bear or something else baby related. So that's why I would choose this baby bum cake over the first footprint cake, but I still don't want to make body parts on cakes. And this final little extra one that I'm giving you, I found this picture of this bird on a branch cake that I made a long time ago. And look at the stencil on here. I couldn't believe it. So when I first started stenciling on cakes, I would always use royal icing because that's what people said you had to do, okay? I always followed those weird cake rules that people put out there. You can't put your cakes in the fridge. Can't put fondant in the fridge. You have to use royal icing on your stencils. I don't do any of that. I follow my own rules, if you will. But do you see how thick the stenciling is on this cake? It looks ridiculous. And this is the same exact stencil, I still have it after all these years, that I used on this cake. And I have a video showing you how I do a buttercream stencil on a buttercream cake. And do you see how thin it is? And it's more refined and looks polished and it looks professional. And yes, I can look back at that cake and cringe. However, I have to say, I have learned way more from the cakes that I made and did not like than from the cakes that I made that were a success. I feel like as cake decorators, there is a journey. And yes, you want to start out and you want to be the best that you can be right away, but it's a process. So that's why I say just take pictures of all of the cakes that you make so you can see how far you've come. Know that cake decorating is a process. You are going to learn from your mistakes because when you make a mistake on the cake, at least you know what to do and what not to do for the next time. And I want to let you know I'm over 20 years into this and I still have cakes that I don't like. I have a video, a cake that I made last year that the customer was very upset with, and it still happens from time to time. We are human. We make mistakes. We are not always on our A game, but it is very important to learn a lesson from those mistakes or from the cakes that don't turn out correctly so you can improve and be better for the next one. So I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or comments about this, leave it below. And just a reminder, I have ebooks with all of my recipes. I have my best scratch pound cake recipes, my doctored cake mix recipes, my favorite buttercream icing and filling recipes, along with my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So all of those are downloadable ebooks and that will be linked below. And I do have a Cake Academy membership program, and in that program there are 3 tiers. The top 2 tiers have access to my exclusive Facebook group, and in that group I go live. I do 2-dimensional fondant tutorials. I've done tutorials on buttercream and making your fondant the right consistency. We do cake critiques, we give pricing advice. I post all of my YouTube content early, along with some exclusive video content that I don't post on YouTube, and I post the pictures of all of the cakes that I make along with how much I charge. So I would love to have you in that group. We are having so much fun. I will link that information in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. The link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you could check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next. And hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.